Welcome, everyone. This is Amy McMorrow-Hunter from the Climate Economy Education, Inc. We're here with our Cooperative Owners for Solar group tonight, and I am happy to introduce Michelle Knox from Wind Solar USA, who's going to talk about the problems with insurance. Right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Right, over to you.
All right. Let me share my screen. And all right. Well, thank you to everyone for joining us again tonight, and Chris, to you. And am I correct? Do you work in insurance, or does your family work in insurance? Do you have some experience in the area, or am I thinking of the wrong person?
Might be somebody else. It's not.
Well, then
not
good. You're going to learn a little bit about it. Okay, cool. So what I'm talking about tonight, presenting, is burdensome insurance requirements. And although I ran a renewable energy business at this point, for the first 10 years of my professional career, I worked in insurance. And so, lo and behold, I happen to be an experienced candidate that can talk about these things. So we're going to get started. And again, this is the coalition of our downstate solar businesses that are putting this on. We have Sharif on the line with us from AES, and Orr also is joining us, but part of another meeting. Then EFS and TikTok Energy and Straight Up Solar are also part of the effort of this educational series. So let's start by just creating a baseline, if you will. So current cooperative insurance requirements, depending on the cooperative territory that we're talking about, are anywhere from $1 to $2 million of liability coverage. It varies amongst the cooperatives. I will say that most just require $1 million. And then in addition to that, the cooperative needs to be listed as a certificate holder of insurance on the home, business, or farm owners or umbrella liability policy, or in the case of Southwestern Electric Cooperative, and I guess also now Southeastern, even though they don't have this published, listed as an additional insured. A copy of the renewal policy is to be sent to the cooperative annually, verifying that it is still in effect and that the cooperative is still listed as required. Okay, so then to compare that to what's required in the investor-owned utilities, current Ameren insurance requirements are that you provide a copy of your home, business, or farm owner's insurance. This is uploaded as part of the interconnection application process completed online at ameren.com. There is no minimum limit of coverage required for systems under 25 kWAC, which is referred to as a level 1 application. And there is no requirement to list Ameren as a certificate holder or an additional insured. So before we get into all of this, let's understand some basic insurance terms. So first off, what's personal liability? Well, it occurs in the event of an accident in or out of your home or business that results in bodily injury or property damage that you are held legally responsible for. Liability is tied to negligence. So what is negligence? Well, it's to use personal care resulting in damage or injury to others. Insurable interest. That's an interest in the value of the subject of insurance, including any legal or financial relationship. This generally is relative to some form of ownership in the property being insured. Who is a policyholder? That's the person whose name the policy is issued under, and it can also be referred to as a named insured. Additional insured is any person or entity that is covered under another party's insurance policy. A certificate holder is the entity that is provided a certificate of the insurance maintained by another entity. Okay, those are the basic definitions. So in the next slide, let's talk about the differences. Policyholder versus certificate holder versus additional insured. So the policyholder, again, is just the owner of the policy. The certificate holder is an entity receiving a certificate of insurance verifying the policy limits and dates of coverage. So all they're doing basically is just knowing the coverage that's in effect and the dates that it's in effect for. The additional insured is an entity to which coverages under the policy have been extended. In order to be an additional insured, an entity must have an insurable interest. So in other words, they have to have some stake in the property. And so let's now take that and we're going to apply it further. So how do these terms relate to solar insurance requirements? Well, cooperatives want to be either a certificate holder or additional insured on their member owner's home, business, farm, or umbrella policy, as they believe this protects their workers against bodily injury arising from malfunction of the solar system, if it were to malfunction. In order for the home, business, or farm owner to be liable for any worker injuries, negligence would need to exist on the part of the policyholder that creates the liability. So if a home, business, or farm owner hires a licensed contractor to complete the install and installs products that are UL certified, we're going to cover that in future slides, then any negligence resulting in physical harm would be on the part of the installer if it wasn't installed correctly per manufacturer specifications, or on the manufacturer of the product that failed, not the home, business, or farm owner. Okay, this is, we're going to now talk about safety standards and how those apply. This is an actual, I actually cut this from a SolarEdge SATAP inverter specification sheet. And it shows the safety standards that SolarEdge inverters have to go through. So rapid shutdown, UL 1741, IEEE 1547. What are those? What does that mean? Okay, let's talk about that. So let's start with rapid shutdown. Well, simply put, it's a component of the National Electric Code, section 690.12, that requires that conductors of electricity drop to less than 1 volt of power within 10 seconds of the inverter no longer receiving signal from the grid. Conversely, when grid signal is restored, the inverter must wait a minimum of 5 minutes before integrating solar production. This is for the protection of first responders and utility workers. Okay, now let's go into UL 1741 and IEE 1547. Since 1999, the standard for anti-islanding protection in the U.S. has been UL 1741, harmonized with IEE 1547. So in the event of a power failure to the electric grid, it is required that any independent power producing inverters attached to the grid turn off in a short period of time, i.e. the rapid shutdown that we just talked about. This prevents the DC to AC inverters from continuing to feed power into small sections of the grid known as islands. Powered islands present a risk to workers. They may expect the area to be unpowered, and they may also damage grid-tied equipment. So that's why these standards were put in place, again, back in 1999. So if we go into UL 1741, and it's now UL 1741 SA, and we look at the definition of that specifically, what is it? Well, first off, UL is an acronym for United Laboratories. UL 1741 and 1741 SA, which is the latest version, is a product safety standard that lays out the manufacturing, including the software, and product testing requirements with the goal of producing inverters more capable of riding through grid excursions or even managing grid reliability functions. So all inverters have to go through a testing process in order to get this certification, this UL 1741, and to be able to list it on their specification sheet, like the specification sheet, the cut from the specification sheet that I showed you for Solar Edge. So below is a summary of the tests performed under this standard: anti-islanding, high-low voltage ride-through, high-low frequency ride-through, must trip test, in other words, that it has to trip the breaker if something's not functioning right, ramp rate, startup, and then specified power factor, volt, bar mode, frequency, watt, and volt, watt. So those are the tests that these inverters have to go through in order to get the certification to be able to list them, the inverter manufacturer to be able to list that their product is UL 1741 certified. So then we go to IE 1547. So this is a standard of the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, IEEE, meant to provide a set of criteria and requirements for the interconnection of distributed generation sources into the power grid. So this one's relative to the grid. The document provides a uniform standard for interconnection of distributed resources with electric power systems. It provides requirements relevant to the performance, operation, testing, safety, and maintenance of the interconnection to the grid. So whereas UL 1741 is relative to the product itself, IEEE 1547 is relative to interconnection standards for the grid, to protect the grid. So inverters that are compliant with all safety standards presently are Solar Edge, Enphase, Fronius, SMA, and Yaskawa, which is also called Selectria. So how, you may be thinking, well, Michelle, why are you telling me all this stuff about safety standards? How is that relative to insurance requirements? Well, the aforementioned inverters have been tested and approved to meet all of the covered safety standards. So let's now go back to our terms. So in order for there to be liability, there must be negligence. If a cooperative member owner purchases and has products installed that meet all safety standard requirements via testing by independent third-party labs, then how could there be negligence on the part of the home, business, or farm owner? So next, let's talk a little bit about installer standards. So we as installers in Illinois, if you're connecting solar systems to the grid, you have to have Illinois Distributed Generation Certification through the Illinois Commerce Commission. That's a standard that's set just to make sure that everybody has a certain level of qualifications to be able to interconnect to the grid, again, to protect Illinois' grid system. Additionally, installations should be completed according to the product manufacturer's specifications, which are set to ensure compliance to the safety standards that we've already discussed. Installers should be carrying a minimum commercial general liability limit of coverage of $1 million, minimum. If an installation is not done correctly, resulting in bodily injury or property damage to an outside entity, then it should be the installer, not the home, business, or farm owner that is responsible for the damages. Again, the home, business, or farm owner has hired an Illinois DG certified installer to complete their installation. They are installing UL IEE 1547 certified products. So where's the negligence on the part of the homeowner, farm owner, or business owner? So if we take all of this and we bring it together and sum it up about what we should be asking cooperatives for in terms of changes to insurance requirements. First off, we should require certificates of insurance from the installers of the solar energy system, not from the home, business, or farm owner. If something goes wrong with the installation, it's likely going to be, again, either that the product failed from the manufacturer's side of things or that it wasn't installed correctly. We should require that the cooperative be listed as a certificate holder on this policy for the installer, and that a certificate of insurance verifying this be supplied with the completed net metering and or interconnection applications prior to the install being done. So in the case of Southwestern and Southeastern electric cooperatives, remove the requirement that the cooperative be listed as an additional insured because the cooperative does not have an insurable interest, a financial interest in the home, business, or farm owner's property. They are simply a service provider. We should then require that specification sheets, which most of them already do. Most cooperatives require this be submitted with the applications, but require that specification sheets for all products being installed be provided with the net metering and or interconnection applications so that the cooperative staff can ensure they meet the safety standards for the protection of their workers. That's it. So that was a quick, fast, and dirty presentation about not the most interesting of topics. And I'd like to open it up now if anybody has any questions or something I can answer. I hope it wasn't too technical on the safety side, but I feel like that background needed to be provided so we could understand how these requirements are really excessive.
Actually, I have a question and a comment. I want to point out how important these insurance requirements are. I actually had a customer. We signed a contract. I actually brought this to Michelle. We got started on part of this. Was signed a contract, went home, looked at the insurance requirements, called me and canceled. He was ready to go solar, and the insurance requirements is what had him back out. I do have a question. If you can help me, can you give me an example of when additionally insured makes sense? It doesn't have to be in solar, just.
Yeah, so let's say that I am selling a house to you, contract for deed. And so you're the purchaser of the home. And so I have a financial interest in that home until you pay me, until you've paid me in full. So you would get the policy in your name because we have a contract and you're now the owner. She would list me as an additional insured because if anything were to go wrong or the house were to burn down or whatever before you paid for it, I need to be listed on the insurance check too to make sure that my interest is represented.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. So that's why how an additional insured clause is used. So to think of a utility, which is basically a service provider, wanting to be an additional insured when they have no financial interest in the home, business, or farm, it's just ridiculous. And honestly, most insurance companies will not do it because they're like, no, you don't have any insurable interest. I'm not going to list a utility as an additional insured on the policy. Because if we think about the application of that, as I just mentioned in the example I shared with you, let's say something does happen to the house, completely non-solar related. Whatever, there's a fire or there's hail damage, and maybe the solar system doesn't even get, have any issue. So what would happen is the insurance check would come payable to the insured, the named insured, or the policyholder. And it would also have listed, like I just said, all additional insureds or mortgagees that are, that have a financial interest in the property. So in order for that homeowner to be able to execute that claim and to use their claim check, they'd have to go to the cooperative and have the cooperative sign off on it when it has nothing to do with the cooperative.